Welcome to the Half Empty, Half Full Consumer Advocacy Radio Show. Listen in nationwide on the Tan Talk and Starcom radio networks with your host, Lori Zook, the consumer champion. Each week, we'll be discussing problems and solutions, changing negatives to positives, and helping you, the consumer, to learn something new, get smarter faster, and avoid scams and fraud. All opinions are that of the host and guests, and all shows are for educational purposes only and not to be construed as legal advice. Here's your host, Lori Zook.
And welcome to the show. My guest today is Florida attorney Felicia M. Williams. And we're going to be talking about what you as a consumer need to know about father's rights and family law. Now, Felicia, I want to welcome you to the show. And if you would share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for having me. My name is Felicia, and I'm the president of Father's Rights Law over in Wesley Chapel, Florida, in the Tampa Bay area. I graduated from the University of South Florida, go Bulls, and I am also a graduate of the Ohio State University. I practice father's rights, which is a niche area of family law. We represent guys in divorce, custody, now known as parenting plans and time-sharing schedules. You know, the good guys who love their kids.
All right. Well, how did you come to practice family law, and especially this niche?
What a journey, I will tell you. Lori, it started in college. I volunteered at a local Boys and Girls Club, and I started working with the kids. And from that, I got a passion to teach. And I started teaching, changed my major, my whole focus and goal in life because I enjoyed it so much. And once in the classroom, I started, teaching and working with my children, and I realized that they needed a little bit more. So I decided to go to law school.
That's a good reason. I mean, that's
Thanks.
a great reason, actually. Did you ever find yourself really discouraged, or were you able to,
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. As I mentioned, I changed my life to go teach. And then once I started teaching, I found that I was dissatisfied there too, because I thought if I was the most awesome teacher, that I would only affect a certain number of kids every year. So I was a little disheartened. I actually got in an argument of sorts, or I heard a disagreement from another teacher. He said some of our kids weren't going to make it. They weren't going to do a good job in life. What were we here for? What was the point? He was really frustrated that day. And when I went back to my classroom, it was an after lunch class, and I met with the students, and I realized that as a special education teacher, a number of my students were tracked, and they weren't set, even in 9th grade, to get a high school diploma. And I thought something needed to be done. I need to do more, and I went to law school.
That's excellent. We'll talk about what father's rights law is.
Father's rights law is a niche area of family law, and family law focuses on divorce, parenting plans and time-sharing schedules. That's a new name for custody and visitation.
Okay.
Child support, step-parent adoptions, things of that nature. But our company, our business focuses on the fathers, which is, where I came from in law school and from my teaching background. We decided to focus on father's rights law because we felt that if we could get in contact with the men would reach the children, and my students ultimately would have a better chance at being successful in life.
Okay, now I've seen advertisements for the mother's rights, but I have never seen anybody, do anything for the fathers. Why do you think that is?
I think that some people think that good fathers are like Santa Claus, or a good father for a kid is like winning the lottery. Santa Claus, in that you talk to a lot of people and they don't really believe they exist. That there are guys that are sitting at our conference room table in tears because they want to have their kids, or that when a kid has a great father, it's like a lottery winner, that they're lucky. So I think that mothers, and they deserve their due, they are most likely going to be there for the kids. But it's sometimes the fathers that's the option of what most people think. And we believe that fathers are necessities.
Okay, so when a father comes in to see you, Do you need to give them some type of a reality check, or is there a way to make sure that they're a, quote, good father? And who actually determines if they're a good father?
Well, you know what? We say good guys, and that's because we focus on the guys that want more parenting time with their kids. They want to maintain their meaningful relationship with their children. They want a more active role with their children. So we kind of quantify it in that aspect. What we don't look at is those guys that have extensive records with domestic violence or issues of that sort, or the guys that we call them jerks in our office.
Okay.
That, you know, they want more time with the kids, because here in Florida, more time with your kids, more overnights equates to lower child support. So if we know someone's coming in and they say, yes, I want 50-50 or majority of the time, just because I want to lower my child support obligation, they're not for us.
I gotcha. Okay, so you kind of have a way of pre-screening, so to speak.
Yes, we do.
Now, how do you distinguish father's rights law from men's rights?
Oh, that's an easy one. A lot of men's rights firms, they focus on alimony reform, which is huge in the country today. Right now, there's a big push to abolish permanent alimony. We believe that permanent alimony has its place. And so we differ because we focus on the fatherhood, the relationship between the men and their children versus the men and their wallets. And second, you know, a lot of men's rights firms focus on parenting equality. They believe that you should draw the line in the sand. It should be 50-50 time sharing with both parents. We don't necessarily believe that that's the case. We believe that should be the starting point, but other factors should be considered.
Okay, now are there situations where the father would be getting alimony?
Yes.
Because usually it's, you know, the stereotype, so to speak, is the other way around.
Yes.
So how often do you see that? Is that common?
Actually, it is more often than not. But what's more common is that they don't want it. A lot of guys that are entitled to permanent alimony, because women are on the move and women are making a lot of money. They're movers and shakers in our economy and our culture now. And a lot of them make a lot more money than the men. And sometimes they're stay-at-home dads. That has its place. So yes, men are entitled to alimony, and it does happen more often than not. But in my experience, they don't even want it.
Okay. Well, give me maybe an example. Somebody comes to you, a man comes to you, or a father comes to you and explains his case. What's the process that they go through?
When they come into our office, we do a pre-screening process. What are your goals? What do you want? And then they come in for our initial client interview. We sit down and talk with them, and I ask, what would you like to have happen? I either lead with that or I end with it, depending on their level of nervousness. So we get an idea, even before they come into the office, how many children you have, how long have you been married, if you're married at all. And then what are your goals? Where do you live geographically? Do you live 90 miles away from your children? Are you getting transferred by the military to another state? So we try to work through the factors and find out what the goals are for the family. And then, Lori, I just let them talk, because most guys just need to vent. They need someone that's listening to them, that understands them, and they have that place in our office. So after I get an idea of what they're looking for, what they want, who they are, and what their goals are for their family, I tell them how the law applies to those facts.
Now, do you find a lot of cases don't actually have to go before a judge? Are you usually able to make it so that they're not appearing in court?
Absolutely.
Do you find, since you're representing fathers, a lot of times the mother, I'm thinking, is probably the angry one, depending upon, you know, whether or not the father did anything. Mm-hmm. Coming in, I would look at it and go, wow, these people might be really hostile towards each other, which is in part why they have attorneys, so they don't have to speak to each other, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, you mentioned that men's rights also focuses on parenting equality and talking about the 50-50 in time sharing. Mm-hmm. So what happens if one parent is in the military or one parent has to move away for a job? How could you possibly do 50-50 time sharing?
You really can't. If they live far away, you know, separated by more than 100 or so miles, it just doesn't work for the kids. But what you try to do in a situation like that is you maximize the out of school time. If the child's not yet in school, if we're talking about someone that's a child that's less than 5 years old, at that time, then you can make the 50-50 work. But it's weeks at a time, months at a time that you make those exchanges. And if the parents are not local and you can't do the 50-50 because it geographically just doesn't make sense, then you get the majority of the summertime or spring break. And I like to tell my clients there are certain weekends that you can have 3-day weekends with all the school holidays that are out there. So maximize those 3-day weekends and holiday time. And Skype, electronic technology, FaceTime, you can see your kid every day, even though you can't hug him every day.
Right. What about, I'm thinking back to situations where years ago I had a friend and he did the wrong thing. He was a father and there was a custody issue and he had visitation and he went and got his young son, who was 4 at the time, and basically just kind of disappeared for a while, which I'm sure got him into a lot more legal trouble. So do you find that that's still a common type situation or not so much anymore?
Not so much anymore. It does happen. There are parents that abduct their children, that kidnap them, that hide, that move. A lot of time that happens, Lori, when there's domestic violence. That's definitely not the way to go. So I'm sorry that your friend has done that, and hopefully things have recovered since then. But what we find that happens more often than not is that the families are local, but the father doesn't get any parenting time, that the mother won't allow him to share time with the kids, won't allow him to visit or attend those special events by not notifying him.
Gotcha. Wow. You got a tough job. That's what I can say. Well, talk about the principle that fathers are vital in the lives of their children.
Oh, that's very important. I think in culture today that fathers are seen as options, that, as I mentioned, Santa and lottery winners, that dads aren't necessarily vital, but we believe they're like air. We believe there should be yin and yang, even if the parties are divorced, even if they were never married. Kids need that balance.
Okay, good answer. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and talk more about fathers' rights.
Thank you.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
And welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk radio show. My guest is Felicia Williams. She's a Florida attorney, and she's the president of Fathers Rights Law, PA. By the way, she's not giving legal advice. That's the disclaimer. This is educational. And we've been talking about fathers' rights. And Felicia, let's jump back in with some of the statistics from fatherhood.com.
Well, 43% of U.S. children live without their father. And listen, we're not proponents of marriage. We do what you feel is right. However, if the child has their fathers in their lives, they have a much better chance of graduating from college, being mentally and physically whole. Some of the statistics suggest that 90% of homeless children are from fatherless homes. 71% of pregnant teenagers are from fatherless homes. And that you should keep in mind that doesn't mean that it's not a nuclear family. It means that the fathers are not involved in the children's lives. And that's very important. 90% of arsonists, 63% of youth suicides are from children from fatherless homes. It's important. They're not necessities. Fathers are not luxuries. They're vital for the health of our children and the foundation of our nation.
Right. I would think from a psychological standpoint, if you don't have a father and you're living with your mother who now has to work, to try to support you, and then is at home and works all these hours, then how can one person do all of that and be successful in the raising of that child, even though they're forced to do that?
Right.
Now, I'm sure sometimes the father may disappear, and I don't know what happens what does happen in a circumstance if you can't find the father and the mother wants to go to court and get alimony and they can't find the father? What happens?
You know what? You have to search. You have to look. Sometimes those mothers have the advantage of working with the Department of Revenue. State agencies get involved. They track down Social Security numbers. They work with the Department of Revenue up in Tallahassee, making sure if that person signs up or shows up on the rolls as having a new job, that they get that address and they're able to track them down. But sadly, in a lot of cases, you just can't track down the father. And that leaves mothers in a very tough situation. There are a lot of hardworking, independent women out there. And listen, just because we're for the fathers, that doesn't mean that we're against mothers. We are for mothers because we believe that they need that balance. They need the financial support. They need the physical and mental and emotional support in order to raise children the right way. So sadly, there's some women out there that are doing it alone and they are having to track down and use state resources to find fathers. But there are also a lot of fathers that are there and willing and ready to parent and co-parent.
Right. And they just want a fair shot at it's their kids too. And I think a lot of mothers get angry and do want to hold, in essence, the kids hostage from the father. But they're not realizing what they're actually projecting onto that child is going to force that child to fail down the road because they don't have the mom and the dad, correct?
That's absolutely correct. It's incredibly short-sighted. Sometimes women are frustrated because of what happened in the relationship. He may be a bad man or a bad husband, correctly. Okay. But he may still be a great father. And it's sometimes difficult for women to disconnect, to separate the two, to separate the husband or the ex-lover from the father. That's tough. Sometimes, even though he's there, he may not be that financial support. Maybe he lost his job. Maybe he's just not contributing. But what people don't realize, and what a lot of mothers don't realize, is that that's separate. When the judge looks at your case, yes, he may not be paying child support or enough to suit her needs, but that's separate from whether or not he gets a chance to parent.
Right, and that's the psychological aspect of it, is what you're saying. There's financial versus the psychological aspect of it.
Absolutely.
I gotcha. And I'm looking at some of your statistics here. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 75% of adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers. I mean, these numbers are really sad. Any other comments to that?
What woman would want their child to be a statistic? Just like you said, Lori, it's separating the mental and the psychological aspect. When there's a separation in the family and there's so much anger and frustration and doubt and uncertainty, we have to keep in mind that the fathers are necessary, because even through that turmoil, if the parents don't get that together, this is what they're facing. And no mother and no father wants these statistics for their children.
Gotcha. All right. We'll talk a little bit about the good guys. How do you define them?
Oh, those are the guys who want to parent their children. They want to co-parent. They want to be an active and meaningful role in that child's life. They go to the baseball games. They show up to the parent-teacher conferences, and that they're everything that we think a model father should be. He's the father that wants to take their daughter or his daughter to that father-daughter dance, to be there for prom night. That's who we think of. Again, they're not the guys who just want more time out of spite or to decrease their child support obligations. These are the good guys who love their kids and want to be involved.
So do you find that when you represent a good guy, is it difficult to represent them if the mother is not feeling that the father is a good guy? Because the way I look at it is, okay, maybe let's just say as an example, maybe the husband cheated.
Yes.
Okay. And so now the mother is angry at the father for cheating, but it has nothing really to do with his parenting roles. But I can tell you, I'm sure that there are some mothers in situations like this where they actually tell the kids what has happened, and in a way that turns the kids because now if you say, well, daddy cheated on me, and now the kid's going, whoa, I want nothing to do with daddy.
Right.
So they kind of bring their dirt, so to speak, to that. So maybe give me an example of a case, past or present, without any names.
Sure.
Give me a good example, maybe a bad example of cases that settled or didn't settle.
I can think of so many, Lori, but what I'll do is give you the synopsis.
Okay.
Or to a typical case. The mother will come in and say, because I represent women too, the mother's point will be that he's a cheater, a serial cheater. He's hidden assets. He's hidden money. But on the other end, he's the coach of the local baseball team. He's never missed a parent-teacher conference. He's there every night to read the story. He puts the Band-Aids on the boo-boos. It's really tough to separate those two things, but it absolutely must be done. Because again, if we go back to those statistics, yes, he probably was an awful husband, awful lover, awful to be in a relationship with, but your child needs him.
Okay, good points that you're driving here. Now, you said you also represent women as well. So
Yes.
talk a little bit about that. Are you mostly male-based, father-based, or it doesn't really matter?
The name of our firm is Father's Rights Law. And when we decided to change the name, I thought, that will certainly alienate most women. But I found that it hasn't. I'd say that about 30%, even 40% of our clients are women. And despite the name, they still retain us because their goal, again, isn't that they want the father to disappear from their lives. They need an advocate to work for them. They need someone to reach out and make sure that they get the divorce or paternity settlement that they desire. And most importantly, we think it's a good idea to represent women against the antithesis of a good father, against those bad guys, quote unquote, the ones that have committed domestic violence, the one that have rained holy terror upon those the families. And we think it's vitally important to represent women against those guys so that our good guys won't have to face those negative stereotypes.
I gotcha. So you're all about trying to get the right matchup for the client.
Yes.
Now, again, I go back to sort of the negative on if you're representing a client and it's a father, maybe the mother's the one that's a little wacky, right? I'm sure there are situations like that. You're looking at me.
Yes,
I can
that's
tell.
true.
So you're dealing, though, now with the mother's attorney. How do attorneys have the same kind of battles, or do you just try to keep it right down to earth and say, this is business and let's make it work? Or do you find that the attorneys kind of do the same thing when you're fighting with an attorney?
It really depends. There are a minority of attorneys that just further whatever their clients' wants and desires are, whether or not they are what we'd say qualify as the basic tenets of civility in family law. But I would say that the vast majority of attorneys in family law, those seasoned attorneys, work with a little bit of reality training. They tell their clients what the law is. We try to get them mental health counseling. We just give them a timeout. Credit counseling. I'm sure you know a lot about
Right.
that. Financial counseling, vocational counseling. What do you need to be whole? What do you need to get back on your feet now that this relationship is over? So yes, some attorneys further that, but those are the minority. Most of them work with training their clients to come to the conclusion that this relationship, for whatever reason, is over. Now, what are we going to do?
All right. Talk to me a little bit more. You mentioned mental health, the different types of counseling.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, there are mental health counselors, and those people come in, and sometimes we use family counselors. Maybe the mother needs a counselor all to herself. She has enough issues and things to deal with, and she wants to maintain that confidentiality. So she knows that whatever she shares with that counselor won't be shared in the course of the family law context or the divorce. Then fathers may need the same thing. But what's helpful a lot of times, Lori, is when the family comes together and they sit down with a mental health expert. They can sit down with guardian ad litems, parenting coordinators that will sit down and help them co-parent in this new normal. And that's vitally important and helpful because there are so many skills that they have to learn and have to grow towards in order to make the new relationship and the new dynamic work.
Okay, now who provides the services? Is it done by the county? Are they paying for it? How does that part work?
Usually it's private pay. A lot of people take advantage of their EAP with their employers. They can get a certain number of sessions for free or at a reduced cost. And then also there are some services with the county that you can get a guardian ad litem that may be pro bono or willing to accept cases at a reduced cost. And I will say this, just as fathers get bad raps, so do attorneys. There are a lot of attorneys that will volunteer to serve as an attorney ad litem, a guardian ad litem, a parenting coordinator to help those families switch to the new dynamic for free or at a reduced cost.
Very good. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, Felicia, and we'll come back in just a moment.
My friend.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Tampa Bay's Tan Talk. Entertaining and informative radio for the Sunshine State.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk radio show. My guest today is Felicia Williams. She's a Florida attorney. Father's rights law is what we've been talking about. Now, Felicia, I want to kind of jump in here. There are 3 points that every father who wants to get his kids that they should get. Let's talk about those 3 points.
They are, first, get educated. Know your rights. The second, get proactive. Once you know what you should do, do it. And finally, once that's all said and done, get proof. Trust, but verify.
Gotcha. I like that. You're saying that with a smile. And yep. All right. Talk about the getting educated part.
Oh, it's very important. The number one problem that we see in this component is that a lot of fathers listen to their family members or friends or the court of public opinion. That's generally not a good idea. It's a better idea to consult with an attorney. There are a number of attorneys that will meet with you for free that give pro bono consultations. There are a lot of internet resources. Avo.com allows you to ask questions of attorneys, and you can get some education on what the whole process entails. And it's important not to listen to family members or friends because you only know what they tell you.
And it's emotional.
Exactly.
They're telling you emotional, correct. And I'm going to point out, too, the Avo, avvo.com is an excellent resource. Even when I looked at yours, you have a great Avo rating, and I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
But you'll find some attorneys that don't have such a good rating. So you kind of need to do your due diligence on the attorneys. And do you think it's wise if someone doesn't feel comfortable with an attorney that they've gone to see, maybe they should talk to 2 or 3?
Yes, absolutely. I recommend that you go and talk to 2 or 3 attorneys, because one of the things that we found is that the attorney that you hire should really mirror your personality or further your goals. And you will know that by sitting down and finding out who you're most comfortable with. Do your research. Look on avvo.com. Look on the Florida Bar website and find out if they have a great reputation, if they practice in that area of law. And then sit down with them and gauge your comfort level, because this is a person that you're going to spend a whole lot of money and time with. So you want to make sure that they will further your goals. You feel comfortable and you're confident that while we can't promise what's going to happen, but you believe that they're going to work to that end.
Now, is there a way for someone who comes in to check on attorneys and find out what is their track record? I mean, it's not like, say, foreclosure law where you would track wins and losses. But how would I, if I came to you as a client and say, well, how do I know how effective you are? Is there a way to measure that with an attorney in this type of case?
There really isn't. If you're looking for data, how many parenting plans did you get? How much did you win on that divorce? There really isn't. An attorney can provide that information to you, but it's generally disfavored, because what's a win in family law? Is it 50-50? Is it that I took them to the cleaners? What really is a win? And that's sometimes hard to define.
Right. Well, in the case of custody, it's whatever's best for the child.
Exactly.
But who's determining what is best? So I think that's a difficult part. Now, I know that they can go to the Florida Bar or the AVO and find attorneys that way. Talk about what is an unbundled service and limited appearance. What do those terms mean?
That's very important. A number of people believe they don't have enough money to hire an attorney. And if that truly is your situation, then hire them for limited areas. In family law, you may hire them just to draft the initial pleadings. It may be that you and your ex have come to a conclusion that you think that will work, and you need to reduce it to writing. That limited appearance and unbundled legal services allows attorneys to come in and perform certain aspects of the case, whereas they won't take on the entire case because of the limited funds.
Okay, now is there mediation ever in this type of case?
Yes. Alternative dispute resolution and mediation is really big now. And all cases in Hillsborough County and the Tampa Bay area are first referred to mediation. And it's a great idea. It's a wonderful way for everyone to sit down at a table, or at least be in the same building, and talk about what is it that you'd want and why. So that helps kind of guide the case. And you mentioned earlier, do we always litigate to the death, or is it some time that we all sit down and we're able to resolve the case without going to final hearing? And happily, yes. And that lots of times happens at mediation or thereafter.
Now, is it a wise idea to hire an attorney to review any documents before you sign them? Because I can tell you cases where, a couple of years ago, I had a friend, her husband was in another state, filed a divorce, and she was coming to me. I'm not an attorney, so I actually brought her to legal aid.
Yes.
Because she couldn't afford to do anything. But when I looked at the documents, I said, wow, it looks to me like he's trying to get everything and leave you with absolutely nothing. And that's why you have got to have legal counsel.
Yes.
Correct?
You are absolutely correct. I am screaming for joy on the inside right now, Lori. I'm so glad that you made that point, because a lot of times what my clients are, they're pound wise and penny foolish. They'll go out and say, listen, I'll have your attorney draft the agreement. They'll read it and they say, oh yeah, this sounds great. But you don't know if what sounds great really is great. Spend the money and hire an attorney to review any document that you sign. And you can contact the Florida Bar, ask family members or friends, and find out someone who would just perform that service. That could save thousands and thousands of dollars, and more importantly, years of heartache.
Right. I mean, there's an old saying that if you do it right the first time, everything's great, right? But
Absolutely.
If you try to do it, which is usually the cheaper way, it's cutting off your nose to spite your face because you did it wrong. Not only did you pay the first person to do it wrong, now you're going to pay a heck of a lot more money to go back and have someone fix it and then make it right. So I think that's really an important thing, because people are worried about, how can I afford this? But legal aid for people who are under certain income is available. And then if not, then they need to hire a reputable attorney.
Absolutely. And Lori, you made an excellent point. It is so important, and this is vital in family law, that for parenting plans and time sharing schedules, whether that's divorce or whether the parties were unmarried, you want to get it right the first time. Because if you don't get it right the first time, in order to modify a parenting plan and time sharing schedule, you have to prove what's called a substantial change in circumstance. And that's a burden of proof, kind of like not equal to, but reasonable doubt. Most people know that in criminal law, you have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But here in family law, substantial change in circumstances is a tough burden to prove. So if you get it wrong the first time, not only will it be more expensive for you to fix it, but you may not be able to. And sadly, I have clients that come in all the time that got a bad deal, that were pound wise and penny foolish, or just trusted someone they shouldn't have. And we may not be able to help.
Right. Yeah. Do it right the first time. I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Now, talk a little earlier, you mentioned about unmarried fathers don't have automatic rights to the time sharing in Florida, that they have to establish paternity. So talk a little bit about that.
If you were never married and you have a child with someone, and this is important for fathers to know, that in the state of Florida, you may be a biological father, but you are not the legal father. That means that you don't have an automatic right to access your child, not to time sharing, not to decision making, nothing, not until a judge says that you do. So if you're an unmarried father, the most important thing for you to do, even if you're still in a great relationship, is to establish yourself as a legal father. And that doesn't end with signing the birth certificate.
Wow, that just threw me for a loop. I didn't know that. Okay. So if married fathers have equal rights to mothers in Florida, if they're a child born of the marriage, that's correct. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, mention a little bit more about the parenting plan and the time sharing schedule. You said get it right the first time because modifying it later down the road is really going to be difficult. Can you give me an example of a case where maybe that has happened?
Sure. A typical case would involve a parent who trusted, they were still in great relationship, and they said, you know what, I'm going to go with every other weekend. And that's going to be a Friday to Sunday. Both parents are active and involved in their child's lives. Both parents have pretty much the same job and the same income, live geographically close. And he just says, you know what? You can have them during the week. I'll have them over the weekend. Really, there's no standard of minimum contact, Lori. But that is far less than the minimum that he would be awarded if he went to court or if he just talked to a family law attorney that was knowledgeable in that area and could tell them that more is out there. You're entitled to more.
All right. What happens if circumstances change down the road after you come to an agreement? Let's say down the road, one parent has to move away or financial circumstances change. Then you go back and attempt to do some type of a modification?
Yes. If one parent needs to move away beyond the statute, then they have to file what's called for relocation. If the other parent, of course, doesn't agree. And then you have to go to the judge and explain to the judge, why would it be in the best interest of the children to move far away from the other parent? And there are a number of factors that come into play, whether or not that parent is active and involved in the child's life right now in the same area, whether or not it's going to be of a bigger benefit financially for this person to move on. If the parents, one of them wasn't really involved, then why would it matter if they move to Hawaii if you're not active when you live 20 miles away?
Right. Well, let's say that they're active and the father moves away out of, let's just say, I don't know, California, moves out to California. Now you modify at some point that agreement so that the father still has rights. It might be summers or it might be, Christmas holiday type of thing.
Yes.
Then who pays for the child or children being transported back and forth? Is that usually split up between the parents or? It is.
Yes, it's split up between the parents. And if the court has to order it, the court could modify the child support obligation so that a large amount of that money is redirected to travel expenses and making sure that contact is maintained between the parties. Some parties voluntarily agree that I'll pay for one plane ticket out, you pay for the plane ticket back. And it kind of works out that way. But usually it's a component of increasing or decreasing the child support obligation.
Okay, now when one parent wins the child enforcement, the payments, for example, how is that done through the state? If I'm the mother and I'm going to pay the father, is it done through the state or do they make direct payments?
You can do both. You can make direct payments directly to the person who's owed the child support. And this is a very important point that I think that most mothers don't realize, that usually the father is the payee, let's say. But mothers don't realize that there's a component of child support that's also their share, even though it doesn't actually physically leave their bank account and travel to the other parent. So when the other parent pays the child support, then what they'll do is make sure that it goes directly to the other person, or it could go to the state depository. We recommend that it goes to the state depository because direct payments over time, if you make payments and there's ever a question as to whether or not the payment was actually made, then what are you going to do? Call your bank and pull up 10 years of checks, canceled checks? And that's if you wrote a check at all.
So the state, in other words, is keeping an actual record of the payments. That way, if there's something in question, the one parent doesn't have to go back and try to find all the records, correct?
Absolutely. That's so vital.
Wow. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to finish up because we've got more to go.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Welcome back to the Half Empty, Half Full Talk Show. My guest today is Florida attorney Felicia Williams. We've been talking about father's rights law. Now, Felicia, let's talk about getting proof because you mentioned trust verify, and
Yes.
that's probably really, really important in a lot of these cases. So talk about that.
That's huge, Lori. Most of my guys, like I tell you, I believe they're good guys. So what they come in with is that they're not saying, I want to take her to the cleaners. They say, you know what? I want fair. I want this over. I want it as painless and cheap as possible. So with that being said, what they do is trust a little bit too easily. Sometimes they remember that they're former lovers and they trust them or trust their judgment because obviously the mother has great components or they would have never got together.
Right.
But they don't separate that their prior relationship to the new family business. And you have to negotiate these issues at arm's length that even though you were former lovers, may still be friends. This is a business decision that we're making and you should give due diligence to it.
I gotcha. Okay. And I'm betting that that's probably easier said than done in some cases.
It really is. Some guys have so much pride and some just say, you know what, she's a good mother, and they give away the whole farm.
Okay. Wow. Talk about getting a DNA test.
I recommend DNA tests, married or single, DNA tests, because there are some shockers out there, Lori. I've personally experienced them not only in my practice, but in my personal life. Whether or not you've been married for 18 years or longer, or it was unfortunately your relationship with your ex was only overnight.
Okay.
You need a DNA test in order to prove paternity, because what you don't want to have happen is as that child ages or medical issues arise, that you realize that really isn't my child.
That's got to be scary. And do you find yourself as an attorney representing fathers, if they do the DNA test and they find out that they're not the father of the child in the custody, you know what I'm saying? In that situation, what happens?
Lori, those are the most heartbreaking envelopes and letters to open. There's a reason why Maury makes so much money with You Are the Fathers. There's a lot of drama and heartbreak involved there. And you don't want to be on the other side of that envelope when you find out that the child that you've loved and trusted and cared for and paid for really isn't your child.
All right, well, if the child is not biologic to the father, can the father still say, hey, I have been the father to this child and I still want to be because the child is recognizing me as the father? Or are their rights thrown out because the DNA doesn't match?
It really depends on what stage they come to that conclusion. If they sign the hospital paternity acknowledgement and they say, yes, I'm the legal father, and they are married to the child's mother,
okay,
and they want to maintain their rights, and they certainly can.
Okay, I'm sort of speechless because I sit here and go, wow,
yes,
that would be a real shocker because now the father, whoever's the one that is not the biological parent, from the psychological aspect, they've got to be emotionally devastated.
They are.
And that's got to be a difficult part of your job.
It is, but let me tell you what they do a lot of times, Lori. They don't care. And more often than that, they don't want to know. They've loved this child. It doesn't matter what the DNA test said. I've raised this child. I have cared and I've sweated for that child, and he or she is mine, and that's all there is to it. So they don't want a DNA test. And when you're married, you don't necessarily have to have it because a child born of the marriage is a product, or the legal father the father is the legal father of any child born during the marriage.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Now, you talked a little bit earlier about making payments right to the state for the child enforcement because it might not be a good idea to directly pay the mother because down the road there could be issues and things like that. Talk to me a little bit about retroactive support. What is that? How does it work?
Retroactive support is a function of child support that says that we recognize that it's going to take a while for you to get into court. So from the date that you file, going back 24 months, a mother or a father can seek retroactive child support for 2 years beyond the date that they file in order to compensate them for the child support that was paid or wasn't paid during that time period. And that's very important because another component of that is if you cohabitated, you live together, then that 24 months won't encompass the time that you were living together because we presuppose that you were caring for the child and providing for the needs there. And that's very important. Most fathers don't recognize that when they go into court, they're facing such a large amount of back pay. And that comes in, and that's why it's so important to get educated because they don't know that, yes, you may have a $500 ongoing payment, but now you also have $12,000 in arrears that could be offset by proof of buying diapers, proof of paying childcare expenses, proof of direct payments to mom. And that goes back to, did you keep those records?
Right. Now, child support is something that I see when I work with clients on their credit reports. I might see a child enforcement order. That does not go away. Correct? You are responsible for making those payments, correct? Talk a little bit about that because sometimes people might think, hey, I could wipe that out in bankruptcy, but I don't think you can.
You cannot. Absolutely not. Child support enforcement judgments belong to the child, and you can't go away and give away what belongs to someone else. Child support judgments cannot be bankrupted. Neither can equitable distribution judgments in divorce. If you're supposed to pay off the car, pay down the house, you can't take that over to the bankruptcy judge. It won't work.
Gotcha. Okay. A lot of complications in this. So you really have to know your stuff, which obviously you do. All right. We talked about paying the state, proof of payment for 18 years. Getting certified copies of the record every year to verify all payments made. Those things are important.
It's important.
Let's talk about emotions, because just because you're not in pain doesn't mean that you're not hurt. So talk about the emotional part of that.
I say that a lot. Just because you're in pain, that doesn't mean that you're not hurting. And that happens a lot of times when fathers enter into agreements that sound okay, but it's less than what they're entitled to, or they gave away rights that they didn't know that they were entitled to. For instance, that happens with, you know what, you can have the kids on weekends. A lot of guys don't know that they're entitled to a little bit more than that. Or the mother comes over and says, well, here's half of the child's bills. You pay a certain amount a month, and that will be your obligation. The father's in tune. Yes, that's how much ballet costs, and I think she eats about that much. And they agree to that, and that could be so far more than what they're entitled to pay. And what happens is that they come back years later. They can't build their family with another person because their child support or alimony obligation is so high that they fail to take into account what happens with life, what happens when they move on to another relationship, and they have this huge obligation that was more than what they should have paid.
Now, is there a certain percentage, maximum amount that can be taken out of one parent who's paying the child support? You know, is there a maximum, say, of 25%? Because obviously the other parent has to, that parent has to be able to live and survive. But at the same time, it's a mess because now the mother might not have been working. You know what I'm saying? It sounds like it's just one big mess. And how does someone sort all of that out?
When it comes to alimony, that's the case. And how does one sort that out, Lori? I don't think you could. I wouldn't try to go and sort out surgery. I'd call a surgeon, you know, and I think it's a good idea to at least consult with an attorney to get the lay of the land. When it comes to alimony and child support, it's hard to sort it out. There's a number of factors involved in alimony. Child support is a little bit better because it's based on the statute, but I think that you may want to get some help.
Now, what about sharing an attorney? Can two parents, opposite sides, share one attorney to try to cut down on the cost? You're looking at me like, no.
No, absolutely not. It will be a conflict of interest. And that's another major point that a lot of people don't recognize. And it's a great situation. It starts off, like I said earlier, it sounds great. These two people, they know their relationship is over. They've worked everything out. We have the weekends down. We have the child support down. We're going to split up our bills. I'm going to take this over to the attorney. They'll draw everything up, and it looks like everything we wanted and we talked about. It sounds right, and the other person signs it. But again, Lori, you don't know what you're giving up.
Right. I gotcha.
At least if one attorney prepares it, just hire another attorney that only represents you to review it.
In your best interest.
Yes.
Correct?
You can't share attorneys. It's a conflict of interest. Any attorney that says that, which I doubt they will, that's not necessarily true.
All right. Getting proactive and get going. What do you do?
Be responsive. A lot of times we get clients that come in that they received a letter, and this happens from the state agencies. They get a letter from the Department of Revenue, or they're served with documents, and they're so angry or so withdrawn or so apathetic that they toss it in a jar or they forget about it altogether. And what you have to know is that you have to be proactive. You have to respond to those things. You have 20 days, certain deadlines that you must meet, or you lose your case, or you lose very important rights. You have to be proactive. You have to get going. Once you know what you should do, let's actually get it done.
Gotcha. Take action. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much. Do you have any last comments you want to give to me?
I absolutely do. We represent, like I said, the good guys. They love their kids. We represent mothers who don't care that our name's Father's Rights Law. They want what's best for their kids. I would just say to all of the fathers out there that may be listening, we hear you. We named our firm Father's Rights Law because we recognize your value. Don't give up. Fight for your children and do whatever it takes to make sure they grow up to be happy and healthy and whole, and society will thank you for it.
Great. Can you give me your phone number and your website in case anybody wants to contact you?
Sure. It's 813-944-9495. Again, our telephone number is 813-944-9495. And you can find us on the web at fathersrightslawpa.com. That's fathers with an S, rights with an S, lawpa.com.
Thank you so much for joining me, Felicia. It's been terrific today.
Thank you for having me, Lori.
All right. Well, join us every week for a new Half Empty, Half Full Consumer Advocacy Talk radio show. Learn something new every week and get smarter faster. Be safe.
Tampa Bay's Tan Talk. Entertaining and informative radio for the Sunshine State.